Considerations before sharing your Power Pivot workbook. There are a few items to keep in mind before you put your workbook that's been nicely worked upon, dedicated, all the time you've put into, sharing it with other people, other users. First thing is corporate policies. Always, that would be your first stop to inquire what you can and cannot do. Why? It might be that depending on what is available within your company, you might have a SharePoint site, you might have a file share, you might have just to share it through email, or you might have a cloud storage available to you. But all those should be listed for you, what you can and where you should use them. For instance, the cloud storage, some companies are open for them, some are not. And the reason behind it, because your workbook, since it contains sales data or other sensitive information, they might not want to put it out there without having anybody looking after how it's been secured properly or not. That said, your sensitivity of the data, as mentioned before, most of the time, anything that is business intelligence does contain very delicate information, and companies want to keep it secured in a location that they are fully trusting and know that there is no possible breach. So that's one of the places you have to keep asking about your corporate policies, just in case. The biggest question you're going to have is how secure is your sharing medium? And once more, your corporate policy should be able to explain that. If there are no corporate policies about this, maybe it's time to start creating one. Gather the right people. Ask the right questions. How secure is it? Is it backed up? How easily accessible it is? Who would be the right people who have the keys to this kingdom? Otherwise, you could lose data. That's the easiest thing that could happen. For a second, somebody could breach and copy that data, make a copy it somewhere. Who knows for what purposes, and it could end up in your competition's hands. All these items, please refer to your corporate policies. I cannot exacerbate enough to mention that that is your first stop for all things security when it's this type of data that you want to secure. Now that we've already mentioned where to refer and your first point to stop, it's followed by securing your Power Pivot workbook. There's a few options you have within Excel itself, and you probably have used them before. The first one is marking as final, read-only. You're probably thinking, if the experience you have, well, this one has a workaround. Yes, and that is true. Marking it as final does not mean you can't disable it and start writing again. So keep in mind of that one. We're just mentioning this so that you have it in your repertoire, but there is a workaround against this one. Encrypting with a password. That is another one that helps. One thing you have to keep in mind is that it'll be as secure as your password is and who you share it with. So if everybody knows the password, you might as well not encrypt it with a password because they already know it. The other thing you can do is protect a sheet. When you do this process, you'll get a list of what actions you are protecting it against. In a similar fashion, when you protect the structure, that's just the structure of your workbook that you're protecting. There is not more that you're doing. And we'll see in that demo a little bit what are the pros and cons of each one of these. Lastly, while PDF is not a way to secure necessarily, it is a way to share it and prevent somebody from writing it or changing it. That is one easily available that it's for you, and depending on how you use it, whether you have Voxit or Adobe, sometimes they have the option to install as a printer, and you just go file print directly to that option. It'll create a PDF for you. Where would we do the securing process? It would be under File and our Protect Workbook option. We will see how to reach that option here. And as mentioned before, we have the Mark as Final, Encrypted Password, Protect Current Worksheet, Protect Workbook Structure, and while we have a few others on the bottom, we're not going to be looking at those. Now let's go ahead and secure our workbook. The first step is locate our workbook. In this case, we have one that exists, and it's called Beginning Dashboard Chart and Data Starting Workbook. Imagine that this is your highly secured workbook that you want to share and you want to apply some restrictions to it. The first step is copying and pasting it. Why? We're going to be playing around with options. We are not sure if they're going to work or not to our purposes. So it's helpful to have a copy of it so you can test freely without having any repercussions to your original data. Now that we've done that, let's open it with Excel. Notice we have content, we have our external data connections. We can ignore that easily. We head into the File tab, and now we have this available, Protect Workbook. Let's go ahead and start with Mark as Final. It's indicating us that this workbook will be marked as final and then saved. Click OK. It's been marked, indicating it's complete, and it's the final version of the document. OK, we get the message, and OK. Notice, we get a message that it's been marked as final to discourage editing, but we're getting the message indicating we can edit it anyway. That defeats the purpose already. It's just a distraction to anybody who wants to do any changes in there. So let's go ahead and create a new sheet, and this is to test if a workbook can be edited after being marked as final. Great, let's save it and close. Let's go back into the workbook and see if we defeated the protection, and that exactly is what happened. So as you already noticed, that is a way to just scare away some users, but all those who are determined will definitely be more wanting to proceed and edit and still make changes to your workbook. That said, let's go ahead and test the other option, which is protect encrypt with password. Let's create a password. I'll just type in some password and click OK. It requires us to enter it twice. Okay, it's protected. So now let's close it, saving it, and open it again. Let's, for instance, play around and say that I don't know the password. Try to type any type of password, click OK. It says it's not correct, make sure it's the right one, and that's it. That's where it ends. No password, you don't get to see the file. Now let's supply the correct password. Notice that we're able to delete a sheet, modify. We decrypted the password, and let's save it. Once more, we still require the password to open it, and the data was stored securely in there. It is available, and that was the encrypting with the password. Let's go ahead and try the other option. Protect current sheet. Okay, we're on the current sheet, and we get not only a password, let's see the same one, but we get all these other choices that we can prevent. Which ones can be used or not? Let's remove everything. None of these are allowed. And click OK. Re-enter the password. Let's save it. Close and reopen. So let's try modifying. We're going to enable content so to get rid of this, and notice that I click, but I'm not able to do anything on the sheet yet. I was able to delete it though. So we're getting better at securing, but there are still some caveats that we have to keep in mind. let's go ahead and now modify the structure. Protect the structure. And once more, we indicate the password. And we re-enter it. We're protecting the structure of the document here. So if we wanted to remove something, we're able to. Let's close it and try to open it again. Enter the password. Let's try removing rows. We're able to. Can remove pretty much anything you might need if you have the password there. But notice, it still affects Power Pivot and other items there. In other words, we're still making headway, but we're not there exactly protecting everything at all. Okay, last option. Let's go ahead back in here, undo those changes, and save it as a PDF. We click the PDF, and we're just going to use the same name. Minimum size, and open after publishing. Okay, notice that it was open with Foxit. Once it's secure in here, we really weren't able to modify or anything. We can view it. So one of those easy ways to access and secure your document would be choosing either PDF or other means or a password if you can trust your users, depending on what you're wanting to do. That is how you would attempt to secure your Power Pivot workbook. Sharing the Power Pivot workbook. Now, by sharing, we're thinking about placing it in a location that has already been approved by our corporate policies. In this case, SharePoint is a perfect example of where this could fit in. Why? Because you could have permissions, you could allow some users to edit it, some just to view. It's part of the SharePoint site that would be enabled with Power Pivot features and or Power View. Needless to say, there's multiple ways you can secure it within SharePoint itself, which is an ideal format to share it, easily accessible, permissions, etc. Now, there's another way that we had mentioned before, the cloud storage. This cloud storage could be in the format of OneDrive, OneDrive Business, Dropbox, Box, even Google Drive. But once again, these might not be available for you if the corporate policies do not allow it. We will review an example in a demo of using OneDrive as well, and SharePoint 2013 too. And last one, PDF is always a good way. That might be either a smaller way to send through email or any other format that you might want to share across with your users. Let's go ahead and take a look what it would entail to share your Power Pivot workbook in SharePoint and cloud storage. Okay, this is our Power Pivot site. Notice that I named it PPV just to be a little bit mnemonic there. And while we're not going to go into the details that it took to create the site and permissions and who was involved, all the features that need to be enabled, rest assured, once it's created and it's the right format, what Power Pivot site as mentioned before, you will see the following on the left-hand navigation, a Power Pivot gallery. If you click on it, you'll notice it's empty because we haven't added any document. And that is fine. We have not done so. So let's go ahead and add one. We click on Files, Upload a Document, and Browse. From our folder, we're going to choose the one that we've been using, the starting workbook, and click OK. We're just going to go ahead and save it. No additional customization. Notice that the file is there, but we're not seeing much of what's happening there. If we have permissions, we should be able to manage the data refresh, and this is what you would see. We really don't care if we're able to do and configure the settings at this moment. What I'm going to do is just click OK and force the refresh, navigating away from the gallery and going back. Notice that we see a difference. We see a sales bar chart. We hover to sales data. It's there. We see sales. and we see an empty sheet. Let's go open manually the workbook and see if that is the case, if it is accurate. Well, first, let's expand this correctly. And on the first one, we do indeed have sales bar chart. Second one, we have sales data. The third one, sales data and chart. And the last one, it is just empty. Let's go and verify that we are in the right path. And that seems to be the case. We click. This might seem familiar to you. It's Silverlight. So you're probably wondering, how do I know this is going to work properly for me if it's configured or not for Power Pivot or Power View or Power View? Well, we can tell that it's configured and working for Power Pivot. But what about Power View? We didn't have any Power View report in this workbook. So let's go ahead and upload one that does. We have navigating to our folder, and we have one already that has data with map charts. And we click OK. We save it also, and we do repeat the same trick to force it to refresh, navigating away and navigating back. Well, notice one thing. We are seeing some data that has a little time clock. Let's try again to see if we are able to do something. It's saying it's doing something. We navigate once more, again away and back. Now it finished the job and it was able to refresh. Let's scroll down. Notice that one of our sheets is empty, and that's correct. It was. The first one is. Let's go ahead and make sure we are looking at the same thing. We're opening it manually, and we see two sheets. The first one is sheet 1. It's empty, and the second one is Power View with our map and our sales data and slicer and the other data. Let's head back to the. Notice it says no. It's looking at screenshots. It has a little disable thing. That's something similar. You would see that if Power Pivot were not enabled. Instead of having that clock in there, on the left you'd see a little red not allowed. And that's how you would identify whether Power View or Power Pivot is not configured correctly. You would not be able to see a preview of the data that is existing in those sheets, as we are there. So that gives you a better idea. Power View is not configured, and it's correctly stated in this site itself. Now that takes care of what our sharing our workbook within SharePoint would be. What about the cloud that we were talking about? For these purposes, I have already my OneDrive open. What I would do is choose my file that I want to share, and in this case, I'm going to drag and drop it onto the screen and refresh. Notice it's already there. I click on it, select it, and I can choose who I want to share it with. I can email, send them only for me, invite people, if recipients can't edit, if they don't need a Microsoft account. This is just for OneDrive itself. The other cloud storage services might be similar in certain settings and dissimilar in others, such as Dropbox or Box. They have always competing settings that some work and some don't or not allowed in others of these products. So just keep that in mind, what you are going to be able to do or not. It's not always going to be the same experience or steps to replicate in one product or another. That was easily said and done, uploading the file, and that was all it took, really. And as mentioned before, the last one is PDF, which once you have a PDF stored, as we had created before, you could add it into your email or any other means that you think would be appropriate to share.